Now, let us take a look at another example. Resource smoothing, example 2. The table below shows the preceding and succeeding activities of a project, including their durations and the resource allocation. 1. You are required to draw the network diagram and calculate the early start, early finish, late start, late finish, and floats for each activity. Indicate clearly the critical path on the developed network. What is the entire duration of the project? 3. From the developed network in 1, draw the early start bar chart and resource histogram for the project. If the available resource is 6, address the resource overload only. So we are presented with this information. Activity duration starting from A to H. The durations have been given and the resource per day has also been given. We have the preceding activity and the succeeding activity table as well. So let us move on onto the solution. Resource smoothing solution. So we have a table of information for the activity duration and resource per day and the preceding and succeeding activities. Based on this information, we can draw the precedent network diagram. So as usual, I would advise that we sketch the diagram first before proceeding to draw it with the notation. But as we are familiar with this, I'll go straight away and draw the network diagram. So we have activity A acting as a succeeding activity to activity B, C, and D. And those also are B acting as succeeding preceding activity to activity E, and C also acting as preceding activity to F, and D also acting as preceding activity to G. And activity E, F, and G acts as preceding activity to H. So we now connect these activities and we proceed to do the forward pass and the backward passes. I've done that already. You can do that by yourself. So this is the information, and this would have settled the question 1, which asks for the total duration of the project and determining the critical path. So the critical path is A, C, F, and H, and the floats are on B, D, E, and G. So let's proceed and draw the early start bar chart. With the same information, we bring our chart and we start drawing our bar chart with the resources that are available per day. So for activity A, which has a duration of 2, with resource per day as 2. And we have activity B, also of duration 3, with resource per day 3. We have activity C, also having 6 days duration with activity with resource per day as 3. Activity D has 2 days duration with resource per day as 2. And we have E having duration of 5 days with resource per day as 3. We have a 7-day duration for activity F with resource per day as 2. And we have G having duration of 3 days with resource per day as 3. And we have activity H having a 1-day duration with resource per day as 2. If you look at the bar chart, activity A precedes activity B, C, and D. And activity E precedes activity B, activity C precedes activity F, and activity D precedes activity G. And all these E, F, G precedes activity H, as we have drawn in our network diagram. So let's proceed and draw the the histogram. I beg your pardon. So we have the manpower sources. But let's first of all, find the total resources per day. So we have the total resources as 2, 2, 8, 8, 9, 9, 9, 6, 5, 5, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, up to the 16th day. So we bring that to our forecast and commence with drawing the histogram. So we have the histogram 2, 2, 8, 8, 9, 9, 9, 6, 5, 5, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, and 2. Now, we were told that the available resources are 6. So, we indicate that on the chart and have our red mark. So any resource above 6 would have to be smoothing. So we are going to commence with the smoothing process and get all the resources within the limit of the available resources. There are several ways to do this, as we have 4 different activities with floats. It means these activities can be moved for us to have our resources smooth. So let's continue with the solution. One way to approach this is to move the activity D and G to their latest start, as there is a float of 8 days on these activities respectively. So we have our chart. A is on a critical path. B is not on the critical path, but C is on the critical path. D is what we have to move. D and G is what we have to move by a float of 8. So with the red line suggesting a movement of the activity over the 8 days duration to day 11 and 12. And then we have E remaining where it is, F also remaining where it is, but G would also be moved, and H also remains where it is. So initially, activity C succeeds activity A, and activity G succeeds activity D. But these activities have all been moved since there is a start to finish relationship between these two activities. So let's have our total resources indicated. So initially, where the items in red had different values, for instance, the 6 on day 3 was initially 8, which was above 6 and needs to be smoothened. And the day 11 to day 15, day 11, which used to be only 2, is now 4, and which is within the 6 resources available. So with this, we can draw our resource histogram. So it means the resources have been moved and have been placed in those hatches we see for optimal use of the available resources. So this is how resource histogram came out. The available resources are 6, and the resource loading is now below. So when we look at day 3 to day 7, there is an optimal use of resources. The available resources of 6 have been completely used. So there is no resource available. For day 1 and 2, there is room for 4 resources to be used. It means there is an idle labor there. Only 2 of the resources were used, 4 were idle. But from day 3 to day 7, all the resources available were used. Day 8, all the resources were used. Day 9 and 10, 5 of the 6 available resources were used. And that continues to day 16. So we have addressed the resources issue, and we don't need to import any resource for the resources that have earlier gone above 6 to work on the construction project. Comparing this with the initial resource histogram, we have succeeded in smoothing the available resources by getting the other resources to be moved along the available float of 8 days to a different day for all the resources available to be used optimally. Let's look at another way, the same problem. Another way to approach this is to move the activity B and E to their latest starts, as there is a float of 5 days on these activities respectively. So let's have a bar chart and resource histogram. So we move activity B by 5 days within each float, and we move activity E also by 5 days within each float. And the activities on the critical path remain where they are. So let's look at the total resources available. And these resources are within the available 6. There is none above 6. So we can proceed and draw our histogram. So this is what this also comes out with. There is no resource above the available 6. And activity B and E, which have been moved, will now have the hatch section. It means the resources have been moved forward to add up to the days that we have only 2 resources working. So we have 3 adding up from day 11 to day 15. This is another way of doing it. So you realize that we moved only activities on the float. First, we use activity D and G, and secondly, we can move activity E and B. All of this would work for the project without incurring further cost. Comparing it with the initial bar chart, we have seen that we have succeeded in smoothing the resources. The third way to approach this is to move activity D by 3 days forward and activity E by 2 days forward and activity G by 8 days forward. These activities have flows of 8 days, 5 days, and 8 days respectively. So let's look at our bar chart. So activity A remains where it is, activity B remains where it is, activity C remains where it is, but D would have to be moved forward by 3 days, and E would have to be moved forward by 2 days, and activity F remain where it is because it's on a critical path. Then activity G would also be moved within its float of 8 days, and activity H remains where it is. So let's look at the total resource profile. Yes, so when we add up all the resources per day, we have none of them going above 6. So we can then plot our smooth resource histogram. Yes, so the smoothing has been successful by the movement of the resources to their current position. And when we look at the resource loading, we only have day 1 and 2 that we underutilize the company's resources, but the other days have an appreciable use of the company's resources. Compared with the initial resource histogram, we can see and conclude that we have worked successfully on smoothing the resources of the company.